This is Gemara Metziah, Daf Kuf Tes Zayin, and we're holding on Kuf Tes Zayin Amar Aleph, 6 lines down. The first one line is Tanya Kavose de Rev Yehuda. We're in the middle of a discussion as what you're allowed to take as a mashkoin and which lavim particularly you are over. And we learned that Shitas of Yehuda was that if one takes a rechayim as a mashkoin, there's only the specific lav taking the rechayim, and he's not over the more general umbrella lav for taking klei achila. So says the Gemara, let's bring a raya to this shita. Says in the Braisa, Choval Zug Shel Sfarim. Someone took as a mashkin a pair of scissors from a barber, Vitzemed Shel Peiros, or a yoke of the cow, Chayiv Shtayim. Then he is over in 2 lavim. Why? Because each of these items is 2 utensils. A scissor is 2 knives together. And similarly, a yoke for 2 cows is comprised of 2 different pieces. If he took part of this scissors or half of a yoke, he's only chayav 1. Price number 1. Price number 2. If you took a sturdy pair of scissors, or yoke of cows, I would think chayav 1, says this Braisa. From there we learn out, it says Braisa number 2, these are specifically 2 utensils that do what? Perform one action. And you're chayiv for taking each one by itself. Av called varim, so says the Bryce, we learn now from Rechayim v'Rechev. So to any item, shein shnei kelim yuchadim, which are 2 specific, distinct utensils, like each half of the scissors, each half of the yoke. V'oisim lachachas, chayiv al zebiv ne'atzmai, v'al zebiv ne'atzmai, you're chayiv for each one for itself. But what do we see clearly in this Brisa? That the only Isser that one is going to be over in the comparison of the yoke, in the comparison of the scissor to the rechayim, is the specific lav for that item, and not for the general idea that he took the item of food preparation, which is the raya to Rabbi Yehuda. Continues the Gemara, about 20 lines down, the first one line is Zeh, with a story. There was a person, the Chavasakina Deshkafta Mechavrei, who took a sakina, a knife of a shkafta, of shechting, from his friend. Alternative nefesh. Go and return it. Why? Because it's an item that is used for food prep. V'su kom bedina Allah, and then bring him to Bezdin. Bring him to Bezdin that he owes you money, and then you could claim, you could get back the money. But, said Abaye, you have to return the sakin shel shchita, this knife used for shchita, as it is a kli achila. That was Abaye. Rav Amar said, Rav Eloi tzarich l'meik him medina Allah. No, you don't have to go to Bezdin with him. You don't need any maraya. And you can claim up until the value of the knife. Meaning, says Rava, you could have held on to the knife. You're not. You're returning it gevaldik. But up until the value of the knife, that you're able to claim. You don't need any further rayos to your case. So machlek is Abaye and Rava. Ask the Gemara of Abaye, Lesle Yahu Svara. I don't understand. Why did Abaye say, return the knife and then go to Bezdin and start bringing proofs and whatnot? According to Abaye, you don't hold of the Svara of Rava. You right now have his items. You should be able to claim up until that value. Why is it any different? Go to eat some barley in Nardai. And the owner of the barley came. And what did he do? He grabbed the goats, and Tuva, and he claimed that they ate a lot of barley. What was the psak halacha? You have the goats, and therefore you could claim up until the value of the goats. So too in our case, you have his knife, you should be able to claim up until the value of his sack and shell shchita. Says the Gemara, that's not a kasha Abaye. Hasam namidi da'avdi la'ashuleu lagurehu. Over there, in the case of the goats, the item that he grabbed, the goats, is not something that he generally rents out. It's not something that he lends out. And therefore, what would have happened if he said, oh, those goats are mine, I bought them? He would have had an emmanis to say they're his. And therefore, he could claim up until their value for what he claims the damage was in the barley. But in our case, meaning David Ashula Guri, who in our case, the Sagin Shel Shchita is something that one would lend, is something that one would rent out, and therefore he could not have claimed that it was his. And therefore, says Abaye, you need other rayos. What's the proof? The Shalach Ravuna Bar Avin. If you claim that you bought an item which is normally rent or lent out, Einoi Nemun. And that's why Abaye says return it, and you need other rayos. Says the Gemara, now the Gemara flips. And says the Gemara, 1 second. What about Rava? Now that we understand Shittas Abaye, ask the Gemara, what about Rava? For Rava, let's say Svara. Rava doesn't hold of this Svara. Varava, but we know that Rava, Exuga Disarbala. Rava grabbed a pair of scissors of someone who made clothing, Visafra Dagadata, and a buck of Agadam, he asked me from Yisaimim, and he gave it to them without any raya. So what do we see? We see that Rava clearly holds the fact that someone has an item that is rent, an item that is lent, an item that is a mashil or mas soicherd, then there's no raya whose possession it's in. So according to Rava, the fact that he has this knife, what is the raya? He should still have to bring other proofs. Answers the Gemara, Amr L'cha Rava. Hi Nami Kima de Mifka Kipedi in Shivloi Mishli. You're right, a normal knife someone will lend out. But this knife of Shchita, what happens if he gets a pogrom, if he gets a nick? It's going to passel up the knife. Therefore, people do not generally lend them out. And says Rava, that's the reason why over here I'll be able to claim their value, and he won't need other proof. Hadra Nahaloch Hamikabel. Chazara is always in store, especially as now we turn over and we close in on the final parak, the 10th parak of Metziah, which always, whenever you're near the end, is really the cause for Chazara. As number one, you realize what you don't know. As number two, as you finish, is the greatest cause to start anew. So we move over to the 10th parak, and we start a new Mishnah. Mishnah deals with a house. A house has two different floors belonging to two different people. And through there, we're going to learn different halachas, as we'll see very soon. We have a house, a bayis, and aliyah, a ground floor, an upper floor that belongs to two different people. Shenaflu, that fell down. Shneim cholkin be'itzim, shneim cholkin be'itzim ba'avanim uba afar. The two of them divide the wood, the stones, and the earth. And the two of them divide the wood, the stones, and the earth, meaning the materials of the house. And we look at the stones, which one are more likely to have been broken, and that level receives those stones, meaning we try to gauge, wait, is this stone probably for the top or for the bottom? It's broken, it's not, and we give it to that person. And mixes avana. Let's say one of them recognizes, hey, the top floor was blue stones, the bottom floor was red stones. So I recognize my stones. Nolan, then he takes them, and he subtracts them. So from the Mishnah, we're seeing is that we're trying to split, but if there's a way to figure out what happened, we do that as well. So says the Gemara, Midiktani, from the fact that the Mishnah teaches Royin, that we view which stones are more likely to have been broken and that person takes them. Mechlal, from there we could infer that we're talking about a case where we're able to figure out Iba Chavsa Nafal, Iba Chavta Nafal. We're able to figure out, did it fall due to the brownward pressure? Did it fall due to a sideward pressure? And if that's the case, says the Gemara, if we're dealing with a scenario that we can figure out how this house fell, so in the first case, the Gemara is assuming it's all one case. So why in the first case does it say, you split it? Why are you splitting it? Figure it out, Nechsi. If it fell with a downward motion, then the upper story broke. If it was a sideward push, then it crumbled from the bottom. So why would we split it? The Mishnah says split it, then the Mishnah says Ryan. Ryan seems to imply that we could figure out how this situation happened. If we can figure out how this situation happened, then let's just figure it out and not just cholkim. Says the Gemara, Leitzricha, Dinafal Balaylia. What's going on over here is we're talking about a case where it fell at night and no one was able to see how it collapsed. No one was able to see how it collapsed. That's the reason why it's cholkin. Says Gemara, look at the stones in the morning, how it fell. They put in, they cleaned them out. Why don't we just ask the one they cleaned it out? The people of Shazrabim cleaned it out. They already left, we don't know who they are. Let's say whose property they're in right now. Says the Gemara, we know the classical rule that whoever has the items gets bailus over it. So whoever has the items right now, Shabbat over those stones. The Mishnah is talking about a case where they're currently in a chotzer that belongs to both people. Inami b'shasarabim v'bayisema shotvim b'chayagam l'lokapti adadi. On this type, they're not makbid, meaning the sibayisema is introducing a new yesod. Is that these people were partners, and therefore the fact that the stones were in each other's property does not mean anything. The guy in the top, the guy in the bottom, they have different areas in the chotzer, but they're not makbid keeping items in each other's rishos. Therefore, they will not create a machzakais in order to say olav haraya. We continue 20 lines down to the two dots. The Gemara quotes the next case in the Mishnah, which was what and makir. If he recognizes his stones, he's allowed to take his stones. Says the Gemara, what is the other person claiming? And if the other guy says, oh yeah, those are your stones, pshita. So what's the Mishnah teaching? Meaning the way that I played out the Mishnah, I said, oh, it's red stones and blue stones. The Mishnah is teaching us an obvious thing. The bottom guy knows that those are the top guy. The top guy knows those are the bottom guy. And shkayach, what's the whole discussion? And if the other guy is not maskim, just because he says he recognizes them, why is he keeping them? The Mishnah must be talking about a case where the other guy says, I don't know. So one guy claims those are his. The other guy claims he doesn't know, so he keeps it. Says the Gemara, but if this is true, let me have it to the Rav Nachman, then this could be a kasha on the classical din of Rav Nachman, which said what? Deitmar. Manalibi al any idea. Ravuna Rav Yudam Rav Nachman Rav Yochanan Amri Potter. So says the Gemara, from our Mishnah, if you tell me it's a case of any idea, then it would seemingly be a kasha on Rav Nachman, because Rav Nachman said in the case of any idea, you're Potter. From here it would seem that you're chayiv. Says the Gemara, no. Kedam Rav Nachman sheisik shvua beineim. Achanam kon sheisik shvua beineim. Just like Rav Nachman explained that the case is where there is a shvua, so too the case is where there is a shvua, he has to swear, and that's when he would get his items. Says the Gemara, Yechidam sheisik shvua kiderava. Damar Rava manli biad chavalam eni l'chabiyadi elachamisha masharni yedea. Then Yishalem. But the only reason you're going to be Yishalem without a shvua is because you're not able to swear. But Betzim, you should have sworn, and therefore it's not a kasha on Rav Nachman. We continue 8 lines from the second Mishnah on this page. And you remove those items that that one took that he recognized from the cheshbon. You move them towards the cheshbon of the broken stones. He takes these whole stones, and he doesn't get the other guys. Alma, what do we see? So the other guy, by saying any idea, he's losing out because he's getting more broken stones. Says Abaya, no. This guy who knows some of his stones, he's in a weaker position. Why? Who knows these, he know the rest. Sulesley, so he's not going to get any more of the whole stones aside for the ones that he recognized. And the rest of the whole stones go to the other guy, says Abaya. Is that true? So Abaya is also bothered. How can that be? Because you recognize some, you're going to lose out? Elam Abaye, rather, says Abaye, you take these, and then the rest of the shleimos, you're going to split. He says, so what he gained? He recognized his stones. He got those, but he didn't get other shleimos in their place. So what's the gain? Says the Gemara, lemalbana ravcha. He gains that he identified the ones that were from the wide part, and they're a bit larger. Inami tina demevda, or he knows that these stones were better stones that he gained. So even though he's going to get the same amount of broken stones in their place, he gained in the fact that it could be a bigger stone, it could be a better stone, etc., etc. Says the Mishnah. The Mishnah is 8 lines from the wide lines at the bottom of Kofteh Zayin Amid Beis Abayis Ve'aliyah Nifchasa. We have a lower and an upper apartment. Nifchasa Aliyah. The floor of the upper apartment falls in. Vein Balabayis right to the takein. And the Balabayis, the owner of the house, doesn't want to fix it. Hari Bala Aliyah Yarid Vidar Lamata. The Bala Aliyah, the one who rents the upper floor, could go and live in the bottom floor. Until he repairs the upper floor. Says the Gemara, so just to point out what the case here has to be, is that the owner is living on the ground floor. The tenant is renting out the upper floor. The floor falls in. The owner, the landlord says, I don't care. I'm not fixing your upper floor. He says, you're not fixing your upper floor? Great, but I'm renting an apartment from you. So I'm coming to live in your house on the bottom. And that's what he's allowed to do. The lower up guy, who's the landlord, has to give the tikra, the ceiling, and he has to provide the plaster, meaning they jointly cover the expenses of the repair. Says the Gemara, Nivchasa Beikama. How much of the floor caved in order to have the din of the Mishnah? Last line, Rav Amar, Biruba, Shmuel Amar. No, even Barba, even if it is 4 tfachim. Rav Amar, Biruba, Aval Barba, only 4 tfachim. Loi, why? Adam Dar Chatziv Lamat. Loi, why? Because Loi Adam Dar. No. Loi, because Adam Dar Chatziv Lamata. V'Chatziv Lamala, because you can live part of the top and part of the bottom. Meaning, the fact that a 4 tefach area is broken, that area, that item, you could go and put down below. But says Rav, that's not enough of a reason for you to live on the bottom. And therefore, once 4 tefachim break, you're allowed to go live in the bottom. Says the Gemara, and the truth is we're going to stop over here. Machlek is Rav and Shmuel in the case. Gemara now is going to go weiter and figure out what is the exact case in the Mishnah. But that's going to take us to tomorrow's daf. We'll pick up from here. B'siyata Dishmaya.